Today in this video I'd like to talk a little bit about ancestor influences. Clients come to me for sessions with a particular issue that's happening in their life that they want to explore. So sometimes what comes to the fore, to the surface in the session, is the influence of ancestors, the generational patterns that have been influencing not only the client but maybe the family and other family members in history. So why do our ancestors influence us? Well, we now know, as science has proven to us, that the effects of our ancestors can last up for at least 3 but maybe 7 generations. So the influences of the unfinished issues that our ancestors carry is basically the energy. So the energy of their emotions, their thoughts, their feelings, the physical residues, so that they don't die peacefully. Their traumas, their upset, that energy hangs around, if you liked, or in scientific terms, it would come through the genes to you, the client, today. So the kind of influences our ancestors have on us are many stories, and I'm going to list a few here. So there can be issues in your ancestors to do with famine. Your ancestors, some of them may have had to leave a particular country because the crops failed, they didn't have any work, didn't have any money. And particularly in my ancestors, there's a group that came over in the potato blight. So you may have a recurring pattern in your family, maybe yourself, extended family, of food-related issues that present themselves today. And these can often be linked to ancestors that have had to flee because of famine or crop failure, or in actual fact died due to famine in that country. And their energy, their restless spirit, their restless energy filters down through them to you today. Other stories of ancestor influence are war-torn. So if your ancestors, for whatever reason, the family was split up due to war, members got disseminated around different countries, were never able to get back together again. The family energy can carry a feeling of separation, of loss. And for a client today, they may not know their history, but coming to a session, what comes to the surface is the influence of the ancestors that were separated. So it's always worth, if you're able to look at the stories in your family, the myths, or even do genealogy to discover some of your ancestors. But in a therapy session, we don't need to know any actual facts at all. What will happen is these energies, these residues will come to the surface and we are able to work with them. Other stories of ancestor influence are ones to do with finance. You can have ancestors that maybe have died or have suffered betrayal to do with business. Maybe their business was taken away from them due to various circumstances, and on their deathbed, how they feel, their emotions, their thoughts as they're dying is all related, all connected with this unfinished business of betrayal, losing the money, not being able to look after their family. So the ancestor dies with these very strong, heavy feelings and emotions, and these can actually filter through the family energy to the client today. For one client I had, they had this sense of needing to constantly work all the time. They were a workaholic, we would say. But basically in the session what we discovered was that he still had an ancestor who was trying to make amends for past mistakes, for a past business that failed and his family had died and became shamed because of his reputation had been tarnished. So it's worth looking at our ancestors, and in a session we can clear these residues so that the client is no longer carrying these burdens from the past. Because it doesn't matter how long you talk about your childhood, if you're being influenced by ancestral generational energy, talking about your childhood is not going to clear it. But by working with your ancestors, working with them, helping them to release the past, the burdens they carry, will actually free up the client today. Another possible ancestor influence are those ancestors that were religiously persecuted, may have been executed for their views or speaking out or going against the church. So these influences can filter through the generations to the client today, and how the client manifests these energies are that they have difficulty with their voice or self-expression, may have issues around their throat. So the energy doesn't manifest exactly the same. The ancestor that may have been executed for speaking out or talking blasphemy, as the church would see it, that is not necessarily going to happen today, but the issues around the voice expression can be mirrored. So the ancestors, how they feel, how they were treated, whether they're still wanting to speak out, whether they were condemned by the religious group for what they were saying, all of these energies filter through the generations to the client today. So it's worth really exploring these ancestor influences. Persecution for expressing yourself is a common theme for a lot of people. Not being able to feel that people will listen, or if they're heard, some negative consequence can happen. Another possible ancestor influence is the loss of a loved one. If any of your ancestors in relationship, their partner maybe was a sailor, went off to sea and was never returned again, lost at sea, or they went off to war and never came back, that sense of loss, that deep yearning of separation can be an energy that filters through the generations to you today. So as a client, you may have this deep sense of either not belonging, a separation or loss that you can't really pinpoint in your life today. So we have to look further back. We have to look at the ancestor influences to see whether there is any energy that is still remaining from their life of loss. Maybe some of your ancestors lost a child in childbirth. Maybe the mother died in childbirth, and so the husband was left with loss. So these energies are particularly strong when it's to do with emotions, to do with separation or belonging to a family, belonging to a loved one. So it's good to explore these energies to see whether there's any of this loss, grief, yearning, not belonging that is still with you today. Another ancestor influence is the issue to do with war, to do with fighting. Now you could say, okay, well, in my family we fight a lot. There's a lot of arguments, there's a lot of heated discussion. But we could actually explore whether there's any ancestors that were at war with either each other or at war generally. And that energy of war, of being at war in a battle, is still playing out in the family today. War energy is very difficult and complex because not only do you have the reasons why somebody joins up to go to war, maybe they were forced to join up in centuries before and had to go, couldn't leave. And then obviously we have the enemy. So the fighting for survival, needing or wishing and hoping that you're going to survive this battle. When you see either the enemy coming towards you in ancient battles, or whether you are at the front and feel you're going to be trampled by your comrades behind you. So the feelings and energy of survival can be what the client brings today. The issue of, am I going to survive this? Am I going to be able to get through this? Or the issue of arguments and fights that happen in the family. Always feeling that you're fighting your corner, that you need to stand your ground. These are all kinds of terms that can be linked back to ancestor influences. So, I hope this has given you an outline of a variety of ancestor influences. And if you come for a session, we can explore to see which ancestors, what kind of energy residues from your ancestors you are carrying in this life today that is affecting you negatively. Because that's the whole idea of any of this work that I do about clearing ancestor residues. We're wanting to clear the negative impacts so that you can live your life fully.